Welcome to the Golden State Momcast. Today is October 18th, 2025, officially No King's Day. And I am here to present you with a special episode of the Golden State Momcast where we follow the funding. This is my hacking sweatshirt. So, who is funding No King's Day? According to the internet, organizers describe it as a grassroots pushback against increasing authoritarian excesses and corruption, with expected turnout in millions. Also, according to the internet, despite the grassroots framing, funding traces to a network of progressive nonprofits, billionaire donors, unions, and advocacy groups. Key sources include, you might recognize this name from our Yes on 50 podcast, George Soros and the Open Society Foundation. Hansberg Weiss, a Swiss billionaire, who also donated at least to the 5501 movement, which was 50 protests in 50 states united under one thing. I went and looked it up, and it's funny because that one also, one movement, that's what it's called. Join us in the fight to uphold the Constitution and end executive overreach. Also marketed as a grassroots effort, but also has a lot of funding connected to it. Who else? Arabella Advisors Network. This dark money network, via funds like New Venture Fund, Hopewell Fund, and Windward Fund, channeled over $114.8 million to No King's affiliated organizations from 2019 to 2023, often routing anonymous progressive donations. So that means they basically are a channel of funding that takes it from one network, goes to another. This is all connected. It's all connected. Another big funder, Christy Walton, the Walmart heiress. Hers actually kind of makes sense because Walmart's interested in cheap labor, and so they're kind of put off by the Trump tariffs. But the No Kings protest is also like a kind of anti-oligarchy thing. You know, you got the monarchy, which is like one king, but then you have the oligarchy, which is the rich elite. So kind of the same thing. Like if you're a government ruled by the rich elite, then how is that different than a king? Except sometimes the rich elite might have more disagreements than a king does. Labor unions and advocacy groups like the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, the American Federation of Teachers, also all funded the Yes on 50 campaign. National Nurses United, League of Conservation Voters. That's right. So they all fund to provide operational support, including mobilization and resources. The ACLU, the Human Rights Campaign, and United We Dream are also listed as organizers. There's a really good Twitter account on called Data Republican is Person. Data Republican is a person. I believe she's a blind woman who's really good at data analysis. And she has linked over 31 NGOs, which are non-governmental organizations, to over 1,000 No King events. Those funding sources include federal grants, small dollar donations via platforms like Act Blue. Act Blue is a really interesting one that we should dive into one day. But if you ever get a chance to look into Act Blue, look up James O'Keefe and look up what James O'Keefe did with Act Blue. And what they were doing is it's a political donation site that's specifically for candidates who lean Democrat or who are running as Democrat or left-leaning. There's a counter to the Act Blue for conservative Republican candidates that's called Win Red. I don't think they were doing the same thing as Act Blue, but what Act Blue was doing is they were donating money to candidates under other people's names who didn't make that much money in like years, you know. So I think they went to one woman who was on Social Security, and she donated over like $50,000 to a candidate. And they said, did you donate this? And she was like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's really, really interesting, and it's fraud, and it's crazy. And I actually went and looked it up, and you could see there, because it's public record when you donate to a political candidate, So you can actually go look at the public record and put in your city or your zip code or region that you want to look at, and you can see who from there donated to what. So I did look it up, and I saw kind of the typical votes in my city, but then I did see one or two that had like very high dollar amounts that I was like, oh, I don't know if they did that. I'm not sure. Worth looking into. So I would suggest that. Okay, off the Act Blue train, there were also grassroots and celebrity elements. It's funny how the celebrity elements are always the same people. And it's like, yeah, I get that your candidates all have some things in common, but none of them have everything in common. So it's weird that you guys all support these same people. Jane Fonda. You know, it's funny with Jane Fonda because as an Army veteran, kind of disgusted by her. While we were in the Vietnam War, and we had U.S. military troops in the Vietnam War, which, if you look back at history, when JFK was president, we did not have that many troops in Vietnam. We were not that involved in Vietnam. But after he was shot and killed, and that scumbag Lyndon B. Johnson took his place, all of a sudden we had a mass surge of troops into Vietnam. What does Jane Fonda do? She goes to North Vietnam, to the enemy, and she's like, oh, they're not bad guys. Let me go, like, take a picture on this tank. Let me go, like, hold guns with them. Let me go talk to a U.S. prisoner. There's a prisoner of war. There's a rumor that a U.S. POW gave her a note and that she passed it on to Viet Cong, but that's just a rumor. Who knows? Back to the funding hacking. So one thing that's funny about the funding is this is labeled as a grassroots movement. But if it's not, and if it's funded by Soros, if it's funded by, bad influences, maybe not even foreign influence, but just like destructive to the United States, that's similar to a color revolution where you have outside forces funding your own country's civil war, basically. It's just bizarre. So one of the things that I did, I asked AI because I do like to use AI. I don't trust it, but I do verify it. There's that common saying, trust but verify. So with people, depending on the people, I can trust. But AI, I'm like, no, I'm going to verify for sure. But it's funny the overlaps between the BLM protest and the Occupy Wall Street protest, because they don't seem organic. They all popped up right around a presidential election time, and it was like all of a sudden this surge to like get people out there and to get the media talking about them and to get all this stuff going on. And then as soon as the election's over, it's like, what happened to all those people? Like, I still identify a lot with the Occupy Wall Street movement, even though I'd say I'm mostly like a libertarian leaning conservative who thought I was middle of the road, but things have gone pretty crazy. So yeah, Occupy Wall Street, like, yeah, let's get rid of this. I mean, I don't know I don't invest in stocks. I don't think the stock market is good for business, and I think it's led to a lot of equity and conglomerates and mergers and acquisitions and putting out like these really big numbers when you first open up so that people invest in you, but it's like kind of fake numbers, and then over time you start to see that the real price of the company is not that. But by the time like most of the members of Congress already knew way before you, and so they already pulled all their money out, so now it's worth nothing. So I liked it. BLM funding was massive, $82.9 billion in corporate pledge commitments, plus $90 million to bail funds. That was a wild one too. That I think had Act Blue ties to it. I don't remember. So $90 million to bail protesters out of jail. While Occupy Wall Street was more modest. They had about $700,000 total, mostly through small donations. Okay, so funny thing about that is that even though it was mostly through small donations, there's still a tie between all three. One of them, multiple ties. One of the big ones, again, George Soros, Open Society Foundations. He gave $33 million plus to Ferguson area groups and BLM. He gave indirect support via the Tides Foundation. He was indirect via Adbusters. So a lot of funding that went directly to the group and then indirectly to the group. There are ways you can pay for causes or for candidates that are outside of the declared ways that you have to report it. And he knows all of this. So for anyone wondering who George Soros is, I did bring him up briefly at our last podcast. George Soros, born August 12th, 1930. I'm going to try to pronounce this. Georgi Schwartz is a Hungarian-American investor and philanthropist. As of May 2025, he has a net worth of $7.2 billion. He has donated more than $32 billion to the Open Society foundations, of which $15 billion has already been distributed. Back up to what did he do? We talked about this last time. He funded a lot of U.S. district attorney races over the past decade, primarily through Open Society foundations and other affiliated political action committees like the Safety and Justice PAC and state level groups. This funding has supported over 75 progressive prosecutors who now oversee districts representing more than 70 million Americans. He has affected the lives of more than 70 million Americans for sure, but at least that many. About 1 in 5 people. That is insane. 1 in 5 people in the nation. He started, so this is what AI said. The spending began modestly in 2015 with around 1 to 2 million in test raises in Louisiana and Mississippi, 2015. Escalated in 2016 to 1.7 million for Larry Kastner in Philadelphia, nearly $3 million across multiple California races, $4.7 million specifically for George Gascon in Los Angeles, and continued investments through 2024. I'm sure he's ramping back up again for 2026. Why does this matter? It's that a lot of these DAs promote criminal justice reforms, which that would be cool if they weren't insane. They had very, very reduced prosecutions to the point where people weren't even getting prosecuted for crimes. The police would arrest them, and the district attorney is like the lawyers for the police, almost, kind of. So they take the evidence that the police has, and they take the ticket or whatever, the citations and all the charges that the police officer or whoever wrote up, and they compile it into a case, and then they charge that person with a crime. So if you get 1 out of 5 district attorneys to be very progressive and to not charge people with crimes, that means 20% of your country is somewhat lawless, and you see the outcomes of that in Los Angeles and San Francisco, across probably 1 out of every 5 big cities, if not more than that, in the United States. Okay, here's a conspiracy rabbit hole. I don't think I talked about this last time. George Soros has a son named Alex Soros. He has since given Alex Soros, in the past maybe 2 or 3 years, control of his money. I think it might be the Open Society Foundation. I encourage you to look up everything that I'm saying yourself, because this is all verifiable, but sometimes I do forget a few things or say a figure wrong. But I try not to. I try to have all my notes prepared ahead of time. This one I know off the top of my head for the most part. So Alex Soros just recently got married, and the person he recently got married to is named Huma Abedin. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because she was an aide to Hillary Clinton as senator and in her presidential campaign. Another reason why that name might sound familiar is because Huma Abedin was married to Anthony Weiner. That name sounds familiar is because his last name's Weiner. But he was also the same Weiner, Anthony Weiner, who was on Twitter, the early days of Twitter when it was still Ashton Kutcher was the thing. He was private messaging pictures of him taking selfies with his chonies on and his junk pressed through his chonies too. And a few of the girls that he sent it to, at least one of them allegedly was underage. So he was at the time a sitting member of Congress. he ended up, I don't know if he got impeached or if he just like left in shame, but he tried to come back into politics again after that. And then he has recently tried to come into politics in the last month or so. So I guess in the meantime, after he was done showing his junk to girls on Twitter, and long after Bill Clinton had done whatever with the interns, their wives become like best friends, and then Anthony Weiner and his wife get divorced, and she goes on to marry George Soros' son, Alex Soros. Pretty interesting. Okay, back to the funding for No King's Day. There was other overlap besides George Soros. The Tides Foundation Network routed funds to No King's partners. They also routed funds to the BLM Global Network. And they also had indirect support for Occupy Wall Street spinoffs through debt relief via strike debt. They also have Adbusters ties, so that indirect funding through advertising. And then the other group, which funded all three, is called the Arabella Advisors Network. $114.8 million to No King's affiliates. They funneled corporate pledges of $82.9 billion in total BLM commitments, including via Hopewell Fund for Bail Justice Org. So that's, again, the funding to get people out of prison. Arabella Advisors Networks manages $1.7 billion annually in money for progressive causes, often through multiple layers of companies that you don't actually know who's spending the money and who's getting the money. So that is the main source of funding for these No Kings protests. I think the overlap between all the protests is interesting. So back to, I forgot about this part. Back to the DA races. I asked AI, and that's one of the things with research is like what question you ask really matters, and just talking to people in general, what question you ask matters. So I just asked who was the next highest donor to district attorney races over the same period of time as I asked about George Soros. The answer is Patty Quillen, who's the wife of Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings. She spent approximately $3 million in 2020 alone just on George Gascon. That guy was terrible. If you can go look up some of the stuff he did, it was really bad. For being a district attorney of LA, like, I think he tried to say, like, his job was to get rid of racism. And it's like, no, that's not what the district attorney does. The district attorney's job is to provide a deterrent to crime by prosecuting criminals so that other people don't want to also commit crime. Nobody wants criminals to get punished more harshly than they deserve. Like, there's a chance that I might get found guilty of a crime one day. You know, they say the average American, and I think there's even a book called this, commits 3 felonies per day. And the title of the book is called 3 Felonies Per Day. So that's interesting. The other funny thing about Patty Quillen, wife of Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings, that dude just donated $2 million to the Yes on Prop 50 campaign. I canceled my Netflix last month, partly because of the LGBTQ propaganda in children's shows. I'm done. I'm done with sexualizing children, okay? Done. LGBTQ, sexual. It is not an identity thing. It is a sexual identity. So to talk about it with children is gross. It's so gross. To put it in your children's shows is gross. You get a wood chipper. That's what I think. If I was DA. Okay, DAs can't, like, decide all of a sudden you get a wood chipper. So the funding's interesting. I thought it was really funny that George Soros keeps popping up over and over again with his Open Societies Foundation. So the other thing that I want to talk about with this No Kings protest, this isn't really about following the money at this point, is what the heck? Who's a king? Okay, so Donald Trump's done some stuff. I don't agree with everything he's done. Not that much different from things that Joe Biden did when he was president. Joe Biden signed the most executive orders in the first, I think 2 weeks of him being president than most of the presidents before him had signed in the 4 years that they were president. 11 of those reversed Trump's first term immigration policies that led to the flow of open immigration across our border, 11 executive orders in the first week or two of him being president. How is that not tyrannical? One of them was keep kids. Oh, it was the DNA testing to make sure the kids were coming over with the adults they were related to. How much child human trafficking occurred during the Biden administration? If you ever want to see stuff you don't want to see, there's a guy named Anthony Aguero. I think his page is Anthony Aguero Live. He's a reporter, and he went over to the border and documented a lot of this stuff. There are other good reporters who went down there, and it was crazy and terrifying. And I don't know, my heart, it hurts just to think about that stuff right now, because they would take their cameras and these big bright lights, and they would film the people coming across the border at night, and these people would be in a line about to get processed by the Border Patrol, who were not allowed to do anything during the Biden administration but take the information that was given to them and then let them go. And the reason for that is, if Border Patrol put them in a Border Patrol facility, which they should do, they should put them in an Immigrations and Customs facility when they come over the border, then they would have had to have a hearing within 31 days. But by releasing them, they get a future court date, and I believe it's 97% of people with a future court date do not show up to that future court date. Just insane. So Anthony Aguero would go there with this camera, big bright light, and there would be adults with children sleeping in their arms, unnaturally sleeping in their arms. And Anthony would shine that bright light in their faces, and the kids would not respond at all, where it would wake anybody up who wasn't drugged by a person they weren't related to, so that that person could bring them across the border with no hassle. Just disgusting. I'm talking about Biden. I meant to talk about Gavin Newsom. So, what the heck is Gavin Newsom doing calling Trump a king? It's just the amount of lies and hypocrisy that we accept from our government officials is insane. Insane. So just examples from when Biden was governor during the COVID lockdowns. He was the first government public official to issue an executive order, an executive statewide stay-at-home order. The very first. Was it because California was more affected, or was it because, as he says, as goes California, so goes the rest of the world? He's a sick person. There was no legislative input. It was an executive order. He decided that. He did not let the legislature decide that. He did not say county public health officials can decide if their county should shut down. He decided that. Sounds authoritarian. Sounds like something a king would do. California also had the longest lockdowns in the United States, contributing to a $100 billion economic hit, and mass exodus of residents, which they deny. They deny that people moved out of the state because they've brought so many people in, but who's left the state are loyal, hardworking Californians, and who's come into the state are unfortunately low-income people who want to use this massive welfare system we have. Why wouldn't you? It's like a magnet. And habitual drug users who want to just openly use drugs on the street and get harm reduction kits from nonprofits, which are the only nonprofits still operating for some reason. It seems to be the only ones who are helping out the homeless are these safe reduction kits or harm reduction kits that just give them more drug paraphernalia. And then they go spend $2 or $3 to some drug dealer to get a lot of fentanyl. When Gavin Newsom closed the beaches, parks, and hiking trails, he enforced it via state police, resulting in arrests and violations for activities like paddleboarding alone or jogging without a mask. Caltrans even blockaded access to federal lands like national forests, treating solitary outdoor exercise as criminal activity. Do you remember in July 2020 when he put out an executive order which banned singing and chanting in indoor religious services, even with distancing? Even with distancing. Harvest Rock Church sued and won a federal injunction. Critics called it unconstitutional discrimination. Duh. Newsom threatened jail for violations, fueling recall efforts. I think the second recall against Newsom was like actually paid for by pro Newsom people, just to just like our government, give the appearance of doing something without actually doing anything. Gavin Newsom kept public schools in California closed for in-person learning, the longest out of any other state, from March 2020 through April 2022. That horribly altered the lives of so many children, high school students, and young college students now, or young adults. These kids didn't get normal socialization. They didn't get to play their sports. They didn't get to have their graduations. They didn't get to have, children in abusive homes and have that outlet to be like, oh, hey, trusted adult who I see all the time, let me tell you about what's happening at my house. They don't get that. Despite CDC guidance favoring reopenings, Newsom, in the meantime, sent his own kids to a private school that reopened earlier than California public schools. And one of the big backers of keeping public schools closed were the teachers' unions. So if you want to know which union I dislike the most, it is the teachers' unions. They do not care about students an iota. They do not care about your students. They do not care about any of your students at all. They don't care. UC Berkeley polls showed 44% disapproval, and studies link closures to learning loss and rising youth suicides. Newsom admitted in 2023 it was a hindsight mistake. What a loser, even though so many people were telling him at the time. And you know who was hurt the most was the low-income families. The low-income families who had both parents going to work and leaving the kids at home. Because while the kids were at home, you know who else was at home in their communities? A lot of criminals who got let out of prison early for either COVID regulations or just California has been shutting down state prisons. And it's insane because we don't have less criminals, but they've somehow paid a bunch of people to shut down state prisons. And I think anyway. The biggest thing that I'll mention that Gavin Newsom did was to attend dinner at the French Laundry, despite the regional stay-at-home order that he imposed. That happened in November 2020. So the state order was it banned indoor dining and gatherings that were greater than 3 households. He dined maskless with 12 lobbyists at the upscale French Laundry restaurant. He later signed AB 2098 to punish doctors contradicting state COVID narratives. Dude, one of the best things that I got out of that whole encounter was in his apology when he says, oh, we're all human. We all fall short sometimes. I don't ever feel a need to remind people that I'm a human, but that's not really falling short. That's knowing the law and knowing, oh, I signed this executive order that says these are the rules, and willfully violating it for your donors, for your lobbyists, for more money, more prestige, more power, for your fancy house that you have now in the Bay Area, for your kids' private school that they were going to when other people were home while public schools were closed. Oh man, it drives me crazy. Okay, I'm done now. I'm gonna have to read more about this law that they're talking about because I don't remember that, but I see that it was authored by Evan Lowe, so probably not great. Punished surgeons and doctors for contradicting COVID information, which we now know was mostly bogus anyways. What in the world? So it was found unconstitutional and a violation of the First Amendment. I'm reading a California Globe article by Katie Grimes. I really like the California Globe. They're not right on everything, but they do a good job of saying kind of what's happening without too many lies. which is hard to find in the media these days. That's crazy. Okay, so back to No King's Day. I hope you all enjoy it. I don't even know what is happening, except it just seems like these people advertise for these protests, and then other people are like, oh, I don't like Trump, so I'm going to go to this protest. If anyone's going to the protest, comment below. Let me know. Let me know how it went. Let me know what you did. Let me know if you had a sign. I don't know. It's just interesting. One of the things I like about the United States is that we are not a monarchy. I am, my grandma's side, Hawaiian. We had a monarchy before we became part of the United States. And that's all good when the king is like a wise and noble king. But when you get somebody like Gavin Newsom who thinks that him and his children should be exempt from the very policies that they enact on their people, that's not what we want. That's like, oh man. Okay, so here in my area, they're opening up toll roads on the freeway. So just one lane, so it's just toll lanes. One lane, the fast lane of the freeway, is going to be a fast track lane. So you have to pay for it to be on that during certain times. Where this money came from, I'm like, get back into it. This money came from a proposition that voters voted on to improve the highways and improve infrastructure. So instead of making improvements like getting rid of the potholes or providing more buses and like better trains so you can actually get from Sacramento to San Francisco for round trip for less than, I think it's like $26 or more each way on Amtrak. It's expensive. You can't commute to the city like that. And just for an example, when I was stationed in South Korea in the Army, you could pay like $2 to get almost anywhere in Korea. And it was basically like you pay $2 and you get an all-day ticket. It's still, I looked it up, it's still about $2.50. Okay, again. Who knew? Who knew I'd get so heated about this? Probably like all the people I've talked to about this in the past, they're like, yeah, that's how she gets. So I just think, if you go to it, if you want to do this, go for it. I don't think there should be kings. Ultimately, like Jesus Christ is king. It's freaking awesome that God not only created everything and made everything that we exist in, but he also came down as his son, as a human, as, I'm a human, we fall short sometimes. Gavin Newsom. But no, not like that. But, he went through all the crazy stuff that we go through. The Hebrew people back then were under the rule of the Roman Empire. So there was no king. But they also, I don't know if they had a vote. I think you had to be a Roman citizen to have a vote. So they were under the rule of this government. And that is why, like, my philosophy, one of the many, 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 many reasons I could go on about why I think limited government is the best government. But, with the more power they have, the more power that they'll cling on to. There's almost nobody who, like, takes power and then is just like, okay, I'm done with it now. You like kind of have to take power from them. And the more power that they have, the more they're enabled to like take away our liberties, take away our freedoms, and do terrible things. You get, you eventually get like mass genocide if you have an authoritarian dictator. Or if you look at biblical stories, if you had a bad ruler, they were often sacrificing their family members or their children or other members of society and to like demonic entities. I don't know if YouTube's going to let all that into this podcast, but we'll see. Okay, so that was my episode of No King's Day. It is 1 o'clock now. I started a little bit after midnight. I hope everyone has a good night. Thank you so much for listening to the Golden State Momcast. I hope next episode is a little bit lighter, but I live in California, so who knows?